everyone, again. It's nice to see you this morning. Thanks everybody for coming out. More importantly though, you'd be here anyway. Thanks for being participatory and doing what you do and fighting the really good and quite important fight that we have right now. Not just here locally as always, but in our country. There's a lot happening at the federal level, to say the least. It is meant to be distracting. It is meant to be overwhelming. It is meant to throw everyone in a bit of a tizzy because we can't, it feels like so much of it is out of our control, and every time you start to understand what's happening over here, something else happens over here, right? Again, that is unfortunately, but productively for them, right? That's by design. And so it's really important that we all and so many others stay focused in not letting ourselves get too overwhelmed by all of the different attacks that we're seeing, all of the different lines of communication that we're seeing, all of the different types of fear-mongering and division that we're experiencing, because again, that's the point. It's me. And that's the point, and that's why it's really important for spaces like this and the coalition and the coordination that all of you are doing and building, because it is different than 8 years ago, right? I think we are seeing what preparation for this presidency has afforded them. And they don't care about norms. They don't care about the institutions. They don't care about what is normal governing processes that we all not just abide by, but hold in incredibly high regard, right? They don't care about that. And so we have to not let them get away with that either. So that's why keeping the pressure on, doing meetings like this, events like this afternoon, and there'll be many more opportunities, but it's even so much as sharing social media posts, right? Talking to your cousin that isn't as involved maybe as you are, aren't paying as much attention. Continuing to have the conversation and bringing other people in to recognize that this is not business as usual. This is not just a different presidency. It's not just governing by a party that we may or may not disagree with or agree with. It's not just that. This is something systemically different. And once we kind of come to terms with that very scary fact, we can start to have very confident conversations with other people to get them to pay attention to what's happening. At the state level, right, there are things that we can do, and there's a lot of advocacy that we can push. And there's still a lot of unknown too. So there's still a lot of questions, like we don't know what kind of federal funding we're losing. We don't know that yet. The confusion on the freeze was, I think, both an intention to cause chaos and also just deep incompetence at the federal level too, and quite frankly, some of the tweets and words from the press secretary were used in the court case to turn that funding back on for the moment, because they too are trying to figure out, they're moving almost too fast for themselves, it seems like. And so that is possibly, while terrible, possibly good, because that provides cracks in their plans, which if we are all paying attention and working together and coordinated, we can utilize to make sure that we target those cracks and actually stop the chaos and the nonsense, the division, the fear-mongering that we're seeing kind of across the board. So at the state level, very early, hello, I don't know who you are, but maybe mute. But we love you. At the state level, right, again, there are certain things that we're still grappling with. We're in the middle, I'm a little bit late because we're in the middle of our budget right now and putting together our own budget asks. Those are the Zooms I just got off of. We don't know what that's going to look like. We were just talking about, do we need to change the name of the climate?
I muted you, and so Bonnie, yeah, I muted everybody, including you. So
Oh, me.
Bonnie has to unmute, I'm sorry.
Who's Bond? This is Bond. Is that better?
Yes.
Now I think, Maxine, if you mute, that might end the echo.
No, you're good.
Can everybody turn their cell phones off? Would that be possible? In the room?
Is this better? We can just turn that volume down, maybe, and then they'll, okay. Tell us if we're good. So, we're looking at the different programs that we may need to even do simple things like rename, right? To still be able to get to the funding streams and the programs that we think are critically important. When the immigration raids were first starting and there was confusion, understandably, about what that is gonna look like, we're still living in a world where what is that gonna look like? I put out a statement very early about how schools especially need to be off limits. There's already state law that says schools are safe places. They cannot, first of all, anyone is entitled to a quality education regardless of immigration status. That is New York State law. It also says that schools are protected and safe places. If the federal government comes in and wants to do something else, right, how much does the state have the ability to push back on that? We're seeing Eric Adams just this morning talk about schools in New York City. That's a play for the Attorney General and the lawyers in the world to play out, but from our perspective and from everything we can do from the legislative side, our schools need to be off limits, and we need to make sure that we're protecting all of our immigrant neighbors and family members. There's really great guidance from the New York Immigration Coalition about Know Your Rights in both English and Spanish. I'm sure most people in here have probably seen that, but it's a really good summary, and so I think sharing that out too in community groups is really helpful. We've got, I think in Greene County, in Cairo, we had 2 people picked up in ICE raids, and they were 2 people who were longtime community members. One was here for about 8 years, one was here for 10 years. One of them has a family, neither one of them have any convictions, and there was a job site raid, right? That happened in Greene. So we will continue to see that. I think we have to prepare ourselves and our communities for that, but we can say very loudly that this does not abide by our values. This is not who we believe we are as a people, definitely New Yorkers, and especially as Americans, right? This is not who we should be, and we should push back against that fear-mongering rhetoric. Another point very close to home. We have a constituent here in Ulster County. I don't repeat their name because it's out in the press, but I don't think we should be repeating names in terms for safety. But we have a doctor who has been criminally indicted for prescribing healthcare, abortion medication, to someone in Louisiana. And we knew that would probably happen. That's why right after the fall of Roe, New York State, we, the legislature, come on in, stepped forward and put forward the strongest shield laws in the country to make it so that way the governor could not extradite someone if they are charged somewhere else, that prescribing is legal here in New York. Everything the doctor did is legal. And she also abides by her oath, right? By the oath she took to be a doctor, to provide health care to people who need it. She was approached by a patient and the patient's mother, right? And they provided health care, and now we see, first they were sued civilly, and now she's being criminally indicted in Louisiana. That is an anti-abortion state trying to impose its will across really the rest of the country. And so the great thing is that we have a governor who has said time and again she will not comply with an extradition request. But this is still something that we are facing right now. Again, the fears that we had multiple years ago are playing out here, and for the first time across the country, here in Ulster County. So we are ground zero for some of this stuff happening already. On Monday, I stood with my colleagues and the governor at a bill signing where the governor signed a bill that says that up to the prescriber, they don't have to have their name on a prescription bottle. It can be the name of the clinic,
Yeah.
right? That's actually how one of the ways they found this doctor. That bill is now signed into law. Of course, does that solve all the problems? No, right? You find the clinic, you can find, but it's a step, it's a shield for an
Yeah.
individual person, and it's a step forward in the things that we can control at the state level. It's been a busy week. We've had a lot of stuff. We've also done a lot of work. We know the New York Heat Act is something that a lot of people in this room very much care about and have done a lot of advocacy on. We are working to get that passed and done through the budget this year. We had a rally and a press conference on that just a couple days ago. Some of you were there. So the Senate has already passed that. What that bill does, for anyone who doesn't know, is it does a couple of things. One, it caps energy bills at 6% of a household's income. But two, it removes the 100-foot rule. Right now, utility companies have to continue to run gas lines that are within 100 feet of where they're building. That just perpetuates additional fossil fuel infrastructure, costs a ton of money, and is diametrically opposed to the goals that we all have, which are the CLCPA, and therefore to save our planet, to make sure we have a planet to continue to live on, and a number of other things. So that bill we passed through the Senate already.
This year?
We passed it last year.
Yeah.
So we just started. We're only like 3 weeks into session.
Right.
But we want to get it done in the budget. So we're pushing to get that, to have that be included both in the budget and hopefully get the assembly included, and then we can get that all squared away, which would be huge.
Would it make sense for us to make phone calls to Hochul to put it in the budget, even before it gets passed?
So it could make calls to Hochul. Her executive budget, I mean, the 30-day amendments are still to be done, which come from her. But really, it's also calling the assembly, because the assembly didn't pass it last year. We did. So getting the assembly on board is a big part, because just because the way we do negotiations through the budget, right, it's 3 parties, Senate, Assembly, and the governor. In our individual one houses, we'd want to have both, in both Senate and Assembly one houses, we want to have the HEAT Act, because then it's kind of like 2v1, and then you can negotiate. If it's just in the Senate, it gets a little harder. Doesn't mean it gets done when it's in 2 houses. Also doesn't mean it doesn't get done when it's only in 1, but by the numbers, it's just a good place to start. So I think calling the governor is good, to have them know people care, but also calling the assembly to have it be a budget priority is helpful. Yeah, I'll take questions too.
We have a couple questions from on Zoom. Joan Mandel has a question. Joan?
Sure, well hold on, well I'll just finish and then I'll open up to all questions. And I know we probably gotta go. So I'll just say that there's a lot going on. This will not be the only time that we all talk together. Also, you all know how to find me, but really appreciate everything that you all are doing, and know that we are doing everything we can at the state level. You're both aware. We're also trying to provide some base level of leadership here, because we need a plan at the federal level. We need a better plan at the federal level than we've seen thus far, and I would encourage everyone to call your federal representatives, and not just Pat Ryan or Josh Riley, call them too, but also call members in the majority. Call all the people you can think of calling, because they have to hear from us. They represent the whole country, they represent all of New York, and so it's really important that they hear that the programs and the policies that they're putting in place as it pertains to ICE raids are not who we are as New Yorkers. It's important that they hear that taking over the government unconstitutionally and firing civil servants who are nonpartisan and sharing private information of all of us just to enact some type of individual dream of Elon Musk is not acceptable. If you look at also how they're targeting South Africa, that is a personal vendetta that is playing out through our federal government, right? That's the stuff I'm talking about, that when we're talking to our cousins and our friends and our neighbors and people who aren't as engaged and who are saying, you know, it'll all be fine, that's the kind of stuff that is not business as usual, and we have to keep talking about and sharing how, not just how uncomfortable and unsettling that is, but how abhorrent and unacceptable that is. And so I will now take some questions. Yes.
So on Zoom we have Joan Mandel and Lynn Sakai. So Joan?
You talked about the HEAT Act, and my general question is, what are the other bills is trying to do that we can support? How do we find out about those things?
Yep, so a couple bills that I wanted to mention, so thank you. I'm gonna start with mine because of course I am, but we've got the Hospital Transparency Act, which is a bill that we passed through both houses of the legislature last year that the governor vetoed because she said it should be in the budget. Big budget priority, as we're calling, can use that one too. Basically what the Hospital Transparency Act does is it requires hospitals to disclose what information or what services they don't provide because of policy. That's reproductive care, gender affirming care, some end of life care. We're seeing that already happen right now in New York City with NYU Langone and Presbyterian. Both have stopped providing gender affirming care and LGBTQ care. They have said that. So our bill would at least force folks to say that publicly and would also identify where the healthcare gaps are, so we as a state can figure out where funding needs to go, what policies we need to do, where the deserts are, and how to better help people, because the targeting of our LGBTQ community, especially our trans community, is completely also abhorrent. And so everyone, the governor to start, and we're moving it in our house, the assembly too, but we've got it under control in the Senate, at least I believe, but definitely the governor and assembly folks. Another bill that we're also pushing for the budget is a tax credit that I carry for medical providers and people who are seeking care, specifically reproductive care and gender affirming care, to move from anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ states to move to New York. It's really unaffordable to move for most people unless you have the means. And we also talk all the time about how we're losing population in New York State. We're also talking about how we need more healthcare services across the state. Let's make it affordable for our doctors who want to continue to provide reproductive care and LGBTQ healthcare. Let's incentivize them to come to New York. And then the families who need the care, but it's going to be a lot of young families, right, who are living in a world who want to be able to provide opportunities for their kids or their future kids. Let's make it easier for them to come live in New York too, in communities like ours, and actually show truly what we stand for. So that's a new bill that we're pushing in the budget. Call everyone on that bill if you want, Senate members. It's we'll send it to we'll send it out.
Okay.
We can send a list of bills for everybody. It doesn't have like a catchy name. It's just tax credit. There's, I'll say, two more. One isn't really pushing back against Trump, but it's a bill we just put in about providing better access and equal access to fertility care, specifically egg freezing for people of that age. It's really expensive and not equitable, and so that's a bill that we have this year that would require private insurance to cover that for everybody. There's also, so that's our bill that we just put in, and there's also the New York for All bill, which is the Senator Bernardis bill, which I think many people know. We'll share that around too. I think you all already have it, but that bars ICE and federal immigration officers from entering state and government buildings seeking folks, right, from not being in the courtroom or at the DMV or wherever that might be. New York for All, that's a bill that we want to pass this year that would be protecting folks. There's also access to representation. We need better access for representation for everybody, but also right now to protect our immigrant community, to make sure that they can actually show up if they need to. If they need to show up in court, with actually resources with them to fight for their rights. So those are just a couple.
Michelle, we have one more question from Lynn Sakai.
Yes.
And then I think we'll start our rally.
Great.
Michelle, you're the best, Michelle.
Thank you.
Rather than my question, I would just say thank you so much for fighting for all of us. And have a great rally after this. And I'll send my questions to you after.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn, and nice to see you. So with that, we can all rally, but thank you again for being here and for your steadfast support for being on the right side of history. There's, as I said, we all know, a lot happening, but even if there's one element of all the chaos that's happening that you want to focus on, if that's an easier way to divide and conquer the nonsense, do that. right? If your passion is immigration and protecting our neighbors, we can share information on that, right? If it's on protecting our climate policies so that we have a planet to live on, there's a lot of work to do there. If it's reproductive care and protecting abortion access for people, there's a lot of work there. If it's just better government than ceding it to billionaires across this country, we can focus on that. Pick the places where you want to spend or you feel like you can spend your time, and there's a lot of work to do in each one of those instead of feeling like you have to cover it all, right? People are on it. Find the space where you can invest, and that will make a big difference.
Yeah.
Great.